Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now June 7th of 2023, and given that we're just a couple of weeks out from the official release of Indiana Jones 5, The Dial of Destiny, a lot of fans have been very skeptical and worried about this film based on what has been happening behind closed doors, not just over at Lucasfilm, but also over at Disney and everything revolving around Kennedy and James Mangold. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support, and without further ado, let's get right into the subject. Now, we know that Indy 5 so far has been a disastrous production. We know that the test screenings were very much, underperforming in Disney's eyes. It really wasn't performing all that well, as well as the thoughts from the critics coming at a Cannes Film Festival. That was very much below average, like way below average. That caused a whirl of concern for not just the critics, but also for the fans of the Indiana Jones franchise. And that brings us to the latest of what Kathleen Kennedy recently did that caused Disney to step in and essentially sabotage Kathleen Kennedy's plan to prevent a wave of backlash. So this has a lot to do with the 4 endings that were shot for Indy 5 that we know of so far, one of which actually surprisingly involved killing off Indiana Jones himself, Dr. Jones, by using the Dial of Destiny at one point in time in one of the endings of Indy 5. Now, specifically on top of this, with Lucasfilm's Kathleen Kennedy actively having issues with Indy 5 that is going through the final touches right now, ahead of its release in the United States, one major development coming out of Indy 5 involved what Kathleen Kennedy did and ultimately was sabotaged by the Disney executives. One of the endings that were filmed for Indy 5 involved the literal death of Indiana Jones toward the final frames of the movie. The 4th ending was partially shot, however Indy's death was completely shot for the scene in which it had something significant to do with the use of the dial that would lead to Indy's demise. This was Kathleen Kennedy's plan to use the Dial of Destiny to a weakened Indiana Jones, where at one point he makes a mysterious sacrifice that was fully shot by both Kennedy and James Mangold with Harrison Ford. Now, though the test screenings that got horrible feedback, especially from the Disney executives, to the point that they forced Kathy Kennedy to backtrack this ending and shoot an entire new ending at the time. Those like Harrison Ford was another who heavily found the scene to be disgraceful to his character, as Ford loves Dr. Jones as a character. He may not very well have been too fond of Han Solo living in the Return of the Jedi film in the end, which is why he didn't mind his death in The Force Awakens, but Ford was very furious over Kennedy's use of killing off Dr. Jones toward the end of Indy 5 as a movie that took place in some kind of hidden temple. So let me stop here quick. Now, before I get to the big piece that comes after this, is that given that Kennedy took part in making 4 different endings of Indiana Jones 5 that we know of so far, by the way, there could be more, but the 4 main ones involved a lot of issues rising out of Indiana Jones. There was one in particular that we talked about that was really going to honor Indy and Henry. We're talking about the father and the son being seated in a biplane-like plane, setting off a runway into the sunset. It was alluded to the fact that basically his father was a vision of some kind in Indiana Jones' mind, smiling at each other, where Henry Jones gives him a beautiful piece of a line of dialogue to kind of send off Indiana into the sunset. That was the proper ending, and that was also another ending that was shot, that was canceled by Kathleen Kennedy. And this one in particular, I'm glad that Disney stepped in and canceled it altogether, because this would have created the largest backlash. I believe it would have created an even bigger backlash than The Last Jedi, to tell you guys the truth, only because a lot of fans of Indiana Jones are also fans of Star Wars, and for them to deal with something like this again would have created an even bigger response than ever before, because they went through it with Luke already. They don't want to go through it with Indiana Jones, that's for certain. So, thankfully for Harrison Ford speaking up, and Disney executives speaking up, and the test screenings failing at the ending for killing off Dr. Jones in the end, using the dial, apparently weakening him to the point where he has to make an ultimate sacrifice, I think it really just sounds like nonsense to me. To the fact that she wanted to do something to this degree, it really is coming off as intentional on her end. But I digress. Now, thankfully, this was all prevented by Disney executives, and even Bob Iger stepped in to warn Kennedy about the wave of backlash that this would cause by fans, and even common moviegoers. The scene progressed to a point in which Helena would take the dial and lock it away in a Mayan-looking temple behind stone walls. The final cut no longer kills off Indiana Jones, thankfully, which is an improvement, but not near enough to save the film in any way. Lucasfilm, as well as Disney, is already gearing to losing hundreds of millions of dollars of Indy 5 alone. And look, it's unfortunate, but it is the way it is, and it is what it is, but what does Disney expect? They're going through a similar situation right now with the Little Mermaid film. They're losing money on that. You know, the box office is not doing too good right now. It had a little spike, and it's beginning to flatline and decline. And it's interesting, to say the least, that Kathleen Kennedy would go this far, to go this great of a distance, to kill off yet another heroic character in pop culture history, to mark herself down as yet another prime example of misusing a character, misusing another fine piece of a franchise, a big character such as Indiana Jones. The fact that she wanted to do this all over again, just like she did with Luke in The Last Jedi, it's very apparent now that this is all 100% intentional and part of some kind of hidden agenda, alright? Now, obviously there's always an ulterior motive with filmmakers, but when it comes to Kathleen Kennedy as a producer, it's like next level stuff. I mean, this is like getting really bad at this point. So when you look at Indy 5, look, we are just a couple of weeks out from this releasing around the world, including the United States, and the response that we got at a Cannes Film Festival is not a good response. Usually, when this happens, when they go ahead and see it at a film festival like this, or even like a pre-screening that far in advance, you're going to get pretty good reviews. They're usually more on the positive side, and they're usually going to be more lenient on being controversial or being critical over something like that, especially for a franchise like this. And that just goes to show you that the critics are speaking the truth about Indiana Jones. It's the same exact thing that goes as follows with the Little Mermaid film. It's unfortunate, but it's true that this is the state that, you know, Disney is in right now. So I think that Kathleen Kennedy needs to learn her lesson finally, and I think that this may very well be the final nail in the coffin for Kathleen Kennedy. As long as the numbers follow, we'll have to wait and see what the numbers crunch up to. You know, if Disney finds that this really is that bad of a movie where they lose that much money, they're gonna have to get rid of Kathleen Kennedy as planned, based on the success and or failure of Indiana Jones 5. So anyways, guys, I would really love to hear each and every one of your inputs below in the comments. You know, what do you think about the whole scenario? And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.